Welcome to the Great Indian AI Podcast channel. Today we're diving deep into the life and teachings of a figure who stirred both admiration and controversy, Rajneesh, later known as Osho. You might be wondering why we're exploring this figure on a channel dedicated to all things India.
Well, his stories really deeply intertwine with India's social and spiritual landscape.
Right.
I mean, his ideas challenged traditional norms, provoked intense debate, and ultimately, influenced a global audience. So
It's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it is a pretty big deal.
Okay, so where do we even begin with a figure like this? I mean, his life was so full of twists and turns.
Well, what's fascinating is that his journey began in a small village in India back in 1931.
Look.
Born Chandra Mohan Jain, his early life offers glimpses, I think, of the independent questioning mind that would later captivate and challenge the world.
Right. It's almost like the seeds of his future were sown right there in his childhood.
Mm.
What were those early years like? What kind of environment did he grow up in?
He lived with his maternal grandparents, and he experienced a level of freedom that was unusual for the time.
Really?
This unconventional upbringing allowed him to explore his own thoughts and beliefs without rigid restrictions. It's intriguing to consider how this early freedom might have shaped his later aversion to dogma, and his emphasis on individual experience.
It's like a blank canvas, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then life starts adding those brushstrokes.
Yeah.
So how did those early experiences translate into his youth? Was he always a rebel pushing against the grain?
Even as a student, he displayed a rebellious streak. He challenged traditional religious authorities and explored various techniques to expand consciousness. He questioned everything from established beliefs to social norms.
It's interesting that you mentioned his interest in expanding consciousness, because that becomes a central theme throughout his life, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Before we dive into that, I want to go back to something you said earlier about his questioning of religious authorities. What specifically was he challenging? What didn't sit right with him?
His criticisms were directed at what he perceived as hypocrisy and rigidity within organized religion. He felt that many religious institutions had become more focused on rituals and dogma than on genuine spiritual experience.
I see.
This critique of established structures was a recurring theme throughout his life, extending beyond religion to encompass societal norms and political ideologies as well.
So it wasn't just about religion, it was about questioning authority in general. He seemed to have this inherent urge to challenge the status quo, to push boundaries. And this urge led him to experiment with various spiritual techniques, right? He wasn't content with just reading about it. He wanted to experience it firsthand.
Exactly. He delved into meditation, yoga, and various other practices, always seeking deeper understanding and personal transformation. This exploration wasn't limited to Eastern traditions. He also studied Western philosophy and psychology, seeking a synthesis of ideas that could address the human condition in a holistic way.
It's like he was building a bridge between different worlds, trying to connect seemingly disparate ideas.
Yes.
And this relentless exploration, this quest for truth and understanding, ultimately led him to a pivotal moment in his life, the experience he described as enlightenment, right? What can you tell us about that experience? What happened and how did it change him?
At the age of 21, while sitting under a tree, Rajneesh claimed to have experienced a profound shift in consciousness, a state of unity and bliss that he described as enlightenment. This experience, whether interpreted literally or metaphorically, marked a turning point in his life. It was the catalyst that transformed him from a rebellious seeker into a spiritual teacher, a guide for others on their own journeys of self-discovery.
It's fascinating how a single experience can have such a profound impact, shaping an individual's entire life trajectory. And this is where Chandra Mohan Jain truly becomes Rajneesh the Guru, right?
That's right.
If you're enjoying these insights so far, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the Great Indian AI podcast channel to stay updated on more fascinating deep dives like this one. So tell us more about this transformation, this emergence of Rajneesh as a spiritual leader. What were his early teachings like? How did he attract his first followers? What made him stand out from the crowd?
Well, his early teachings were marked by a bold and unconventional approach. He challenged traditional religious beliefs, criticized societal norms, and advocated for a more open and accepting attitude towards sexuality, which earned him both admiration and notoriety. His charisma and his ability to articulate complex ideas in a relatable way drew people to him.
It sounds like he wasn't afraid to push buttons to challenge people's comfort zones. And this willingness to challenge conventions to speak his truth was a key part of his appeal, wasn't it?
Absolutely. People were drawn to his authenticity, his willingness to question everything, and his emphasis on personal experience over blind faith. He wasn't offering easy answers or a rigid set of rules. Instead, he encouraged his followers to think critically, to question their own beliefs, and to embark on their own unique journeys of self-discovery.
It sounds like he was more of a catalyst than a dictator, more interested in igniting a spark within individuals than in imposing a specific set of beliefs.
Exactly.
And this approach clearly resonated with many as his following began to grow. And this is when he begins to use the title Bhagwan, right? What does that signify and how did it influence his image?
The adoption of the title Bhagwan Shri Rajneesh, meaning Blessed One, was a significant step. It marked a shift in his public persona, elevating him to a level of spiritual authority that some found controversial. It also added to the growing mystique surrounding him, attracting both devoted followers and skeptical critics.
It's interesting how a title can carry so much weight, shaping public perception and influencing the dynamics between a leader and their followers. And as his following grew, so did his platform, right?
Right.
He started traveling more extensively, sharing his message with a wider audience. Tell us about this period of his life, his travels, his lectures, and the growing controversy surrounding his teachings. Was there a particular message or theme that he focused on during this time?
Well, Rajneesh's lectures were often provocative, challenging societal norms and religious dogma. He spoke openly about sexuality, criticized traditional morality, and advocated for a more individualistic approach to spirituality. These unconventional views attracted a growing following, particularly among young Westerners seeking alternative paths to self-discovery.
Okay.
But they also sparked controversy and drew criticism from those who viewed his teachings as immoral and dangerous.
So he was walking a tightrope, challenging the establishment, while also attracting a growing number of people who were hungry for his message. And this growing following led to the establishment of his first ashram rite. Tell us about that transition, the move to Mumbai, and the formation of his community of neo-sannyasins. What did this term signify, and what were the key elements of this early community?
In 1970, Rajneesh moved to Mumbai, where he began initiating followers into his neo-sannyasin community. The term neo-sannyasin reflected his modern interpretation of the ancient Indian tradition of renunciation. Unlike traditional sannyasins who renounced worldly possessions and lived ascetic lives, Rajneesh's followers were encouraged to embrace life fully, to celebrate both the material and the spiritual.
So it was a reinterpretation of an ancient tradition, a blending of the old and the new. What were the key elements of this neo-sannyasin community? What were their practices? What were their beliefs?
They wore the traditional orange robes and malas, signifying their commitment to the path of self-discovery. But their lifestyle was far from traditional. Rajneesh emphasized the importance of meditation, but he also encouraged his followers to engage in therapy groups, expressive arts, and even dynamic meditation techniques that involved cathartic emotional release.
It sounds like a vibrant and unconventional community, a blend of Eastern spirituality and Western therapeutic approaches. And this community continued to grow, eventually leading to the establishment of the Pune ashram, which became a global hub for Rajneesh's movement. For those of you eager to learn more about the Pune Ashram, its rise, and the controversies that surrounded it, make sure to stay tuned for part 2 of this deep dive, right here on the Great Indian AI Podcast channel. Welcome back to the Great Indian AI Podcast channel. We're in the midst of that deep dive into the life and teachings of Rajneesh, and last we left off, he had just established his community of neo-sannyasins in Mumbai. The movement was gaining momentum, attracting followers from all over the world drawn to Rajneesh's unique blend of Eastern spirituality and Western thought. This growing global following led to the establishment of the now famous Pune Ashram. What can you tell us about this ashram? What made it so unique, and how did it become such a central hub for Rajneesh's movement?
Well, the Pune Ashram, established in 1974, became a vibrant melting pot of spiritual seekers, offering a wide array of meditation techniques, therapy groups, and workshops. It wasn't just about silent meditation. Rajneesh encouraged dynamic meditation techniques involving dance catharsis and emotional release. He also incorporated elements of Western therapy like Gestalt and encounter groups, which were quite novel for that time, especially within a spiritual context.
It sounds like a fascinating blend of East and West, traditional and modern. What was the daily life like at the ashram? Can you paint a picture for our listeners, help them visualize what it was like to be a part of this community?
Imagine a sprawling campus bustling with activity. The day would begin with dynamic meditation, followed by discourses from Rajneesh, where he would share his insights on various spiritual and philosophical topics. The afternoons were dedicated to therapy groups and workshops exploring everything from emotional healing to creativity and self-expression. The evenings often culminated in Darshan's intimate gatherings where Rajneesh would interact directly with his disciples, answering questions and offering guidance.
It sounds incredibly immersive, a complete departure from everyday life. And this unique blend of practices and teachings attracted thousands of seekers, particularly from the West. But as with any movement that challenges the status quo, there were also controversies. What were some of the criticisms leveled against the Pune Ashram? What were people concerned about?
Well, the ashram drew criticism for its perceived permissiveness and its open approach to sexuality.
Okay.
Some viewed it as a hedonistic haven, a place where traditional values were being flouted. There were also concerns about the intensity of the therapy groups, with allegations of emotional manipulation and coercion. These controversies fueled the perception of the ashram as a cult, a label that Rajneesh and his followers vehemently rejected.
It seems like a classic case of a movement pushing boundaries and facing backlash from those who felt threatened by its unconventional ways. And as the ashram grew, the scrutiny intensified, leading to increasing tensions with the Indian government. What were the key points of contention between the ashram and the authorities? What were the main issues that caused friction?
The ashram faced challenges related to land use visa restrictions for foreign visitors and accusations of tax evasion. The government saw the ashram as a challenge to their authority, a potential source of social unrest. The situation escalated in 1980 when a Hindu fundamentalist attempted to assassinate Rajneesh during a public discourse. This event marked a turning point, highlighting the growing hostility towards the movement and the need for a new, more supportive environment.
So the ashram's very existence in India was becoming increasingly precarious. And this, coupled with Rajneesh's own health concerns, led them to seek a new home, a place where they could build their vision without constant external pressure. And that's how the controversial Rajneeshpuram chapter began in the United States, right?
Yes, that's right.
Before we delve into the details of Rajneeshpuram, a quick reminder to our listeners. If you're finding this deep dive insightful, be sure to hit that subscribe button and share it with your friends. Now tell us more about this move to the U.S. What were the motivations behind it, and how did they end up choosing a vast ranch in Oregon as their new home?
The decision to move to the U.S. was driven by a combination of factors. The mounting tensions with the Indian government, coupled with Rajneesh's need for specialized medical treatment, made relocation seem like the only viable option. They needed a place where they could create a self-sustaining community free from external interference. The Oregon Ranch, with its vast expanse of land and relative isolation, seemed like the perfect location to realize their vision.
So they purchased this massive ranch, over 64,000 acres, with the ambitious goal of creating a utopian city, Rajneeshpuram. What was the vision behind this experiment? What kind of society were they trying to build? What were their ideals and aspirations?
Rajneeshpuram was envisioned as a self-sufficient community based on the principles of meditation, self-discovery, and ecological sustainability. They wanted to create a model society that would showcase the transformative power of Rajneesh's teachings, a place where individuals could live in harmony with nature and with each other.
It sounds incredibly idealistic, almost like a modern-day Garden of Eden. But as we know from history, utopian experiments often face unexpected challenges. And in the case of Rajneeshpuram, the clash with the local community was almost immediate, wasn't it? What were the main points of contention between the commune and the residents of Oregon? Why did these two groups find it so difficult to coexist?
The arrival of thousands of Rajneesh's followers was met with suspicion and fear by the local residents.
Yeah, I can imagine.
They were apprehensive about the commune's rapid growth, its unconventional practices, and its potential impact on their way of life. The conflicts revolved around land use water rights and the commune's political ambitions.
It sounds like a classic case of us versus them, a clash of cultures and ideologies. How did this conflict manifest? Were there specific incidents that escalated the tension? Did things ever get violent?
The commune's efforts to incorporate as a city, their attempts to influence local elections by busing in homeless people to register as voters, and their aggressive legal tactics further alienated the local community. The situation became increasingly adversarial, with both sides digging in their heels, fueling a cycle of distrust and hostility.
So the dream of a harmonious coexistence quickly unraveled, replaced by a bitter battle for control. And as these external conflicts escalated, Rajneesh himself withdrew from public life, communicating primarily through his secretary, Ma Anand Sheela. What led to this withdrawal? Was it a strategic move or a sign of something else?
There are various interpretations of Rajneesh's withdrawal. Some believe it was a deliberate strategy to distance himself from the growing controversies, while others suggest that his health was deteriorating, necessitating a period of seclusion. However, his silence only added to the mystique surrounding him, fueling speculation and suspicion from outsiders.
It's almost as if the less he spoke, the more powerful his presence became, at least in the eyes of his followers. And during this period of silence, the commune's internal dynamics began to shift as well, with Ma Anand Sheela assuming a more prominent role. How did her leadership style differ from Rajneesh's? Did this shift create tensions within the community?
Sheela was a much more pragmatic and confrontational leader than Rajneesh. She was known for her sharp intellect, her unwavering loyalty to Rajneesh, and her willingness to use any means necessary to protect the commune and advance its interests. This assertive approach led to clashes with both outsiders and some within the community who questioned her methods and her growing influence.
So there was a power shift happening, with Sheela becoming the face of the movement while Rajneesh remained in the background. And this shift would have profound consequences, leading to some of the darkest chapters in the Rajneeshpuram saga. But before we delve into those events, let's take a quick break. When we return, we'll explore the escalating conflicts, the shocking revelations, and the ultimate downfall of Rajneeshpuram. Stay tuned for the final part of our deep dive, only on the Great Indian AI podcast channel. Welcome back to the Great Indian AI podcast channel. We're continuing our deep dive into the life and teachings of Rajneesh, and the story has taken quite a dramatic turn. As tensions escalated in Rajneeshpuram, Ma and Sheela took the reins, her leadership style a stark contrast to Rajneesh's more philosophical approach. This shift in power led to a series of events that would ultimately unravel the commune and its utopian ideals. What happened during this tumultuous period? What actions were taken under Sheela's leadership that further alienated the community from the outside world?
Under Sheela's direction, the commune became increasingly isolated and defensive. They amassed weapons, implemented strict security measures, and engaged in a series of illegal activities, including wiretapping voter fraud and even a bioterror attack on the Dallas, Oregon, where they contaminated salad bars with salmonella, sickening hundreds of people.
That's a shocking escalation. What was the rationale behind such a dangerous and unethical act? What were they hoping to achieve?
Well, the bioterror attack was intended to suppress voter turnout and influence the outcome of local elections.
Oh, wow.
Demonstrating the lengths to which Sheela and her inner circle were willing to go to maintain control and protect the commune from perceived threats. Their actions, driven by paranoia and a siege mentality, only served to reinforce the perception of Rajneeshpuram as a dangerous cult.
It's tragic how their fear and desperation led them down such a destructive path, ultimately undermining the very ideals they claimed to uphold. And these actions, which were carried out in secret, eventually came to light. Right. How was this web of illegal activities exposed? And what was Rajneesh's response when he learned about what had been happening under his watch?
Internal dissent, coupled with investigations by law enforcement agencies, eventually brought the truth to light. When the extent of Sheela's crimes was revealed, Rajneesh publicly condemned her and her associates, claiming that he had been unaware of their actions. He invited the authorities to investigate, leading to the arrest and conviction of several commune leaders, including Sheela.
So the curtain was pulled back, revealing a dark underbelly to the utopian experiment. And Rajneesh, who had been a silent observer for so long, was forced to confront the consequences of his own detachment. What happened to him after Sheila and her associates were arrested? Did he face legal repercussions for their actions?
Despite his claims of ignorance, Rajneesh himself was arrested in October 1985 on charges of immigration fraud. While he maintained his innocence regarding the other crimes committed by his followers, he eventually pleaded guilty to the immigration charges and agreed to leave the United States.
So the Rajneeshpuram experiment came to an abrupt and ignominious end, leaving behind a legacy of broken trust, legal battles, and a community torn apart by internal strife. What happened to Rajneesh after his deportation? Did he attempt to rebuild his movement elsewhere?
After being denied entry into several countries, Rajneesh returned to India in 1986 and revived his ashram in Pune. He distanced himself from the events of Rajneeshpuram, changing his name to Osho and shifting his teachings towards a more introspective and less confrontational approach.
It sounds like a period of profound transformation, both personally and for his movement as a whole. What were the key elements of this later phase of his teachings? How do they differ from his earlier, more controversial pronouncements?
Osho's later teachings emphasized inner transformation, meditation, and mindfulness. He spoke less about social and political issues and focused more on spiritual growth, self-acceptance, and living in the present moment. He incorporated elements of Zen Buddhism and other Eastern traditions into his discourses, presenting a more nuanced and less provocative perspective on spirituality.
It's almost as if the firebrand preacher had given way to a more contemplative guide, someone who had perhaps learned from the mistakes of the past and was now seeking a more peaceful and inward-focused path. Did this shift in tone and focus resonate with his followers? Did he manage to regain the trust and influence he had lost?
Osho's ashram in Pune, rebranded as the Osho International Meditation Resort, continued to attract followers from around the world drawn to his unique blend of Eastern mysticism and Western therapeutic techniques. His teachings, now presented in a more accessible and less controversial format, found a wider audience through his books, audio recordings, and meditation retreats.
So despite the controversies and setbacks, Osho's message continued to resonate, albeit in a transformed form, and his impact extends beyond his immediate followers, doesn't it? How would you assess his overall legacy, his contribution to the broader landscape of spirituality and self-discovery?
Well, Osho was a complex and controversial figure who challenged traditional norms, provoked intense debate, and ultimately left an undeniable mark on modern spirituality. His emphasis on meditation, self-awareness, and personal transformation has influenced a wide range of spiritual seekers and therapeutic practices.
Right.
Whether one agrees with his methods or not, his impact on the quest for meaning and self-discovery in the modern world is undeniable.
It's been quite a journey exploring Osho's life and teachings, from his rebellious youth to his controversial leadership, and his eventual transformation into a more introspective spiritual guide. His story is a reminder that even the most unconventional paths can lead to profound insights, and that the search for truth and meaning is often a winding and unpredictable journey. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the life and legacy of Osho. If you enjoyed this exploration, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the Great Indian AI podcast channel for more captivating journeys into the heart of India's rich cultural and spiritual tapestry.